everyone, I'm back with a brand new tutorial. In this one you will learn how to draw a raccoon from a photograph with some realistic looking fur. And after that I'll teach you how you can place the raccoon in a field of animated growing flowers. This is a very long tutorial in which I'll be showing you how to draw a raccoon. But of course you can draw your own animal in your own style and just go straight to the animation part. For this tutorial I created a new brush set. If you want to use these brushes you can download them for free in the link below the video. And for all of my Dutch followers who want to learn everything about Procreate, I have an online Dutch course now where I teach you everything about Procreate. If you're interested, please have a look at the link below the video. On this website you can also find this tutorial in Dutch. At the end of this video I'll show you how you can transform your GIF file to a longer MP4 video that you can share on Instagram or your social media. If you use my tutorial and you are proud of your result, please share it on Instagram and tag me in the video. It always makes me proud to see or share your work. If you want to stay up to date for next free tutorials, please subscribe to my channel. So let's go! We start off with a new canvas, a square canvas that is 20 by 20 centimeters. DPI can stay on 300. My iPad Pro gives me 92 layers. If you have another iPad, maybe an iPad Air or just a normal iPad, then this amount can be lower. But if you have like 40 or 50 layers, that's more than enough for this illustration. Place the color profile on sRGB. CMYK is not necessary because this is not going to be a print, this is an animation, so sRGB is okay. And then you go create canvas. So now that our canvas is ready, we can go to Google or maybe Pinterest, but Google is okay. And we're going to look for a raccoon. If you don't want to draw a raccoon, you can go for any animal you prefer. And you have a lot of different pictures of raccoons here. It seems that they can be pretty nasty also. But just pick a nice one. This is okay. You can see them from the side, so yeah, that's a good picture. I'm going to try to enlarge this one. Okay, yeah, I can enlarge it this way. And now I'm going to take a print screen of it. I could also save the image, but print screen always goes pretty fast, so I always take a print screen. I'm going to crop it already and then save it in my images. Going back to Procreate, and now I'm going to import this photo from my library. Insert photo. And then I'm going to lower the opacity of the image by tapping with my two fingers on the layer and sliding to the left. So it's a lot less visible. I'm going to create a new layer on top of the image. And in this layer I will create my sketch. I'm going to do this with my own brushes. I created a set of 5 different brushes. You can download them in the link below the video. It contains different brushes. I have a sketch pencil, a pencil that contains fur. Yeah, you can use them. I'm going to start with the sketch pencil. I'm going to do this in a dark gray color. And making the brush size around 17 or 18%. Yes, that's okay. But first I'm going to flip the image because I want the raccoon to look to the other side. So I'm going to the layer again, to the transform tool, and then I'm going to flip horizontal. And now I'm going back to my sketch layer and start sketching. And in first instance, I'm going to just trace the image. So it will be quite realistic. I'm not going to trace all the little details. Just the outlines and the most important details of the raccoon. And then in the next step, I will play with the proportions. So the raccoon will be a lot cuter and yeah, you will look like a real illustration. But first I'll just do the realistic proportions to have a good start. So now its tail is on the back, it's going backwards. But I think it will be prettier when I draw it just in front of him and also a little bit larger. So that it looks like he's really inside his tail and he's curling up in there, so it will be a lot cozier. Yeah, because of his tail you don't need to see his paws anymore, so I'm going to erase them. And that could also be a lot easier to draw because paws are really difficult, so yeah, this is a good choice. And now I'm going to adjustments and then the liquify tool, and then I'm going to push and pull my sketch just to play with the proportions already. I'm going to make his head a bit bigger. I'm going to try to make his face already a little bit cuter. Okay, I'm going to leave it this way and then I'm going to create a new layer on top of my sketch. I'm going to first lower the opacity, and in my new sketch with my sketch pencil I will trace it, but I'm also going to alter my raccoon to make it more look like an illustration. I will add the sketch of this raccoon in the download link also, so if you're finding it difficult to alter your image like I'm doing now, you can use my sketch. So this face mask is a little bit difficult to draw. I'm going to take a look at the original image again. I see it's getting smaller on the sides. I'm also doing this in the illustration. I'm leaving some white around the eyes, so the eyes won't sink in the black mask. You can still see them because there's a white edge around the eyes. So on his tail he has those typical black stripes like every raccoon has, and I'm just going to draw these stripes in the direction of the tail. Going to leave some space between them. And I'm also going to add some shading. That will be easier when I'm coloring it in afterwards. Then I know where the shading will be. Behind his head, between his paws, on the back of his legs and his body. I'm just roughly doing this to see for myself where the shading will go. And then I'm going to create a new layer for my plants and my flowers. Still using my sketch pencil, and now I'm going to place some plants in front of the raccoon. It's a little bit hard to see if I'm using black, but afterwards I'm going to place some white in the plants, so the contrast between the plants and the raccoon will be a lot better. And in the original illustration it will be in color, so there will be a lot of contrast between the plants and the raccoon. Now I see this plant is just too large. I'm going to make the leaves a bit smaller. No, I'm just going to use free selection and select the plant, and then I'm going to make it smaller with my transform tool like this. Yes, and now I can add more leaves to it. So of course you can use your own style of plants. You don't have to exactly draw my plants, but make sure that your plants don't overlap, because afterwards when we're doing the animation it will be a lot easier when they are separate from each other. So make sure they don't overlap each other. I'm also going to draw a plant that's coming from behind of him on the back. So he's right in the middle of the plants, not behind them, but is really standing in the plants. I'm going to make the layer of my raccoon invisible so I can better see my plants. I'm making my raccoon visible again, and I'm going to create a new layer underneath the layer of the raccoon, and I'm going to use the rusty brush because there's going to be some grass underneath the raccoon and also some shading. And now I'm sketching where the grass and the shading should be. I'm going to erase the shading that's in the raccoon because my raccoon is still transparent at some places. It's not opaque. So I'm going to erase it. I can better see it then. Okay, now it's still difficult to see the plants in front of the raccoon, so I'm going to add some white in the plants to give it a lot more contrast. I'm going to just do this with white and my sketch pencil on the right layer, and just inside of the leaves some white. And now you can see where the plants are, so it will be easier to draw later on with the color. Okay, now I'm going to add some grass. Underneath the raccoon. Just some stripes here and there. And also a few little plants, just some weeds between the grass. I created a color palette for this illustration. You can also download it in the link below the video. Now I can merge my top 3 layers. That will be my sketch, and I'm going to lower the opacity of the sketch. And then I'm going to create a new layer underneath my sketch layer, and I'm going to start with the gray color. I'm going to do this with the drawing brush. And first I'm going to color in the complete raccoon. So it will be one large gray shape. And afterwards I'm going to add the details and the shading. I'm just following the outer tracing lines. I'm gonna fill the shape with the gray color. That goes a lot faster. And then I'm filling the little white spots that are left open. Sometimes it's really hard for me to move my canvas. I don't know if you have the same issue. Please let me know, because I'm getting really frustrated by it sometimes. Okay, now my shape is completely filled with the gray color. I'm now going to place alpha lock on my layer by swiping to the right with my 2 fingers on the layer, and then I'm going to a lighter gray and I'm going to the rusty brush and I'm going to add some highlight on the top of his body and his head, just all the places where you see more of the light. And first I'm going to do this all over his body so that he has some texture in it, and then I'm going to add more of the light gray on the top of his head and his nose. That's the places of his body where he will get more sunlight, because the light is coming from the top, also on his back. Going back to a darker gray, and then I'm going to draw his mask. Don't forget to every now and then take a look at the original image just to see where the marks should be and that they are kind of realistic. And then I'm going to draw his nose, just full black. And then afterwards with a white color I can add a little highlight to make the nose really shiny, because I think that the nose of a raccoon will be wet also, just like a dog. Like this. Spread it a little bit so it's not just one white sharp spot, but a little bit faded to the edges. So here is his mouth. It's underneath his nose, so it will be a really dark spot. There will be a lot of shading. I'm gonna draw his eyebrows a little bit. And it doesn't matter if this looks a bit rough, you see, it's not so detailed. The detail will come on afterwards when I use the other brush, the brush with the fur. So this is just a shading that I'm adding roughly. So now I need to add some shading on the part between his legs and on the back and behind his head. And it's not so easy to do this really precise with my rusty brush. So first I'm going to draw some shapes with my drawing brush. I'm going to do this on a new layer. Now I'm first going to I'm going to use clipping mask, because then the shape will be in the shape of the body of the raccoon, so it can go outside. And this way I can really precisely draw where the shading will be. It's a little bit hard to exactly explain what I'm going to do, but you will see in a few minutes that when the shapes are drawn, and I'm going to use select to select my shapes, and then I can add the shading in the shape, which you will see in a few minutes. Okay, now my shapes are ready. You are going to tap on the layer and press select, so there will be a selection of the shapes. This layer invisible and create a new layer on top of it. And then we're going to the rusty brush in a dark gray color, and then we can add the shading in these shapes that are selected. First I'm going to place a clipping mask on it. Yeah, that's better, so it stays in the shape of the raccoon. And then I can add some shading, and the shading will also be in a separate layer, so you can erase some parts of it if you need to do that. And for me, this is just a really easy technique to add some shading that goes gradually. Because if you do this with a large brush, it's really difficult to go to these really tiny spots. And this way you have your shape and you can just gradually add your shading without fussing with that little pencil. So yeah, for me this is the easiest technique. And sometimes I make the sketch layer invisible just to see if the shading is placed correctly. And I see that I forgot a spot between his legs. It needs some separation also. And for that I'm just going to add a new layer. I think that will be the best. And then I'm going back to my drawing pencil and I'm going to draw a shape where the legs will be separated. I'm going to fill it, then place a selection on it, make it invisible, and I'm going to my layer where the shading is, and then I can add the shading. Okay, I'm going to add the eyes, but for that I'm going to make my sketch layer a lot less transparent so I see where the eyes should be. And I'm going to do this on a new layer on top of the shape of my raccoon. And I'm going to do this with the drawing pencil. And I'm going to fill in the eyes with black. I'm going to make the sketch more transparent again, so I know where the eyes exactly are. And now I can place some highlights in the eyes with white. So now the eyes are really shiny, but there need to be a little bit white around the eyes. So I'm going to a new layer below the layer of my eyes, and I'm going to add some white around the eyes so that they really pop out. I'm doing this with my rusty brush, and you see immediately that the eyes are really popping out. I'm also fading the white highlight in the eyes so it's a little less sharp. I believe that this shading spot behind this ear is not correct, so I'm going to erase this in the shading layer. Yes, that's more correct. And now I'm going to make him smile a little bit because he's looking a bit sad. I'm going to do this with a dark gray color in the layer of my eyes. And I'm doing this with my sketch pencil. Just a little bit of a smile, not too much. And maybe add some highlight with the rusty brush. This is difficult to make a smile pop out a little bit. Shouldn't be too much. Ooh, that's a little bit too wide. I'm going to erase it a little bit more. Okay. And this looks good. Yes. Now he has a little smile on his face. And now it's time to draw his whiskers on his nose. I'm going to do this on a new layer. And I'm going to place this new layer on top of all the other layers underneath my sketching layer. And I'm going to do this with a very light gray with the sketching brush. And the other whiskers that come out of his face, I'm going to draw them with a dark gray color. So if I use light gray, you nearly won't see it, so it has to be a darker color. I'm also going to do this with the whiskers that pop out of his face on the left side. Okay, now it's time to draw his fur. I'm going to do this on top of the shape of the raccoon in a clipping mask. I'm doing this with the thick fur brush in a very light gray color, not completely white, just light gray. And this brush really follows the stroke that you make, so you can draw the fur really naturally on the raccoon. And I'm going to add more white in between the dark stripes of the tail. I'm going to lower the visibility of my sketch. It's really hard to see where the dark stripes are. So I think I'm going to guess a little bit. Just follow my instinct. Add more white on the top of the tail because there will be more light there. Afterwards I can add some black stripes on the bottom of the tail. Don't worry about the fur that's going in his body, because afterwards we can erase it. It's really hard to precisely draw in his tail, so yeah, just go outside of it and afterwards you can just erase it. It's no problem. So you can add some fur in the spots of the dark stripes, because that also needs some fur texture. Afterwards we can add black fur over the stripes so they will be a lot more visible. I'm going to erase some of the white fur with my eraser tool, and I use the fur brush with my eraser tool so I can erase some of the white fur here and there, especially on the bottom, because there will be a lot more shading. Okay, now I'm going to a dark gray color, and I'm going to add some darker stripes, darker fur on the bottom of the tail. If you use two colors in a fur, or even more colors, it will be more realistic. So yeah, this is why I'm especially adding more black fur especially on the places where the stripes are. Okay, I'm going to leave it this way, and now I can erase the fur that's inside his body that doesn't need to be there. I'm going to switch the position of the layer with the shading. I'm going to place it underneath my fur because the shading has to be underneath it. And now I can erase more of the fur that got outside of the tail. So now I can draw the fur on the body. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to switch the position behind the fur of the tail. And then I'm going to place some light patches of fur here and there just to know which way the fur is flowing and that it's following the curves of his body. This is more than enough, so I won't make any mistakes afterwards. I know which way the fur has to go, and now I can add more fur. to separate the front leg from the back leg with a dark gray color, my drawing pencil. Going back to my thick fur now and add the fur. You see, I'm also going over his tail, but afterwards I can also erase it just as I did with the fur on the tail. So don't worry about it either. It's on a separate layer, so you can erase them. Okay, I'm going to add some fur behind his head also, but of course it's coming in his face, but I can erase it. And I'm going to do this at the drawing eraser brush. And then afterwards, when I add the fur in the face, I'm also going to create a new layer. So I can do the same when I'm going outside of his face. Okay, I'm going to add some more black fur, especially on the back and on the places where it needs more shading. No, not completely black, just dark gray. So in the next step I will draw the fur on its head, but I have to make sure that the fur from the head is nicely blended into the fur of the body, so it doesn't seem like the head is sticked on the body. And I'm going to do this with the thick fur brush in a light gray color. And for that I'm going to create a new layer on top of the other layer, and it's a clipping mask automatically because it's in between the other clipping masks, and automatically the fur will stay inside the shape of the raccoon. I'm sizing my brush till around 17%. And then I will start on the side, and I have to make sure that the edge of my head is kind of disappearing, so that it nicely blends into the body. I'm gonna switch to the thin fur for the parts around his eyes. So in most animals, the fur on the nose is a little bit shorter than on the rest of the body. So make sure that the strokes are a little bit shorter than on the rest of the body. And then it will be more realistic looking fur. I'm going to dark gray. With the same brush, I'm going to darken some places in his head, like the eyebrows. Also this little black frown that's in between his eyebrows, coming out of his face mask. So for the separate strokes, I'm going to use the inking technical pen. going to do this with a dark gray color. The opacity is around 44%, and that's more than enough, otherwise the strokes will be too hard. You can lower it even more, that's just a personal preference. Going back to white. Making the brush as small as possible. It's at 1%, and now the opacity is at 22%, so I can build up more slowly. I must admit that this is not one of my favorite things to do. I don't like adding too much detail in an animal, so this is a little bit out of my comfort zone. So at one point I'm going to stop with adding too much detail, because it's just not my style, and if you zoom out, it's more than okay. Okay, now it's time for the animation, but first I'm going to draw the flowers and the grass underneath the raccoon to just make sure that my colors are correct and that my plants look good, and afterwards I can do the animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my sketch visible again. I'm going to make it a little less transparent. And then I'm going to my green in my color palette, and this one. And then I'm going to this rusty brush. And then I need a new layer underneath the layer of my raccoon. I'm going to place it on top of the original image. So here. And then I'm going to place or draw some grass underneath him. I'm tapping really soft because if I'm doing this really hard, you see it's too intense. So it needs to be really soft. So I'm gently tapping and building up the color. And I'm trying to let it fade out to the sides. And then I'm going to add some darker green closer to his body and his tail, because there is going to be some shading. So I'm going to minimize my brush to 14%. Okay, this looks good. And now I'm going to add the stripes of the grass. And I created a brush for this. It's called grass. You can use it if you want, but you can also separately draw the strokes of the grass. So it's up to you, it's your choice. I'm going to use my brush. I'm going to do this with a dark green color. Make sure that your canvas is straight. So now I can draw my blades of grass on the green layer. So for that I'm going to create a new layer, but I'm going to create this on top. So it comes in front of the raccoon, and if there's a stripe of grass, then you will see this in front of him. So first I'm going to use a dark green, and you can use this brush. It's called the grass brush. I made this especially for this tutorial, but you can also draw each blade separately with just a drawing brush. That's up to you. You choose what you want. So you see that some of the grass stripes are coming over him, but I can erase them afterwards. I'm going to make it a bit smaller to add smaller blades of grass in between. And now I'm going to a very light green to add some lighter grass in between. Also a bit smaller ones. Okay, this looks good, and now I can erase all the grass that's in his body, but I will not erase these ones because they come in front of him and they start at the bottom. So yeah, they just come in front of him and you don't have to erase them for that. I'm going to use the drawing brush to erase, make it large enough. No, not this one. This one. Just make sure that you don't forget a blade of grass. Okay, I think I got them all. Yes. Now I'm going to draw these little plants or weeds that are in the grass. And I'm going to do this with a darker green color and my drawing brush. The size is about 2%. Okay, I'm gonna keep it this way, and with my eraser tool, the rusty brush, I'm going to erase a little bit, especially in the back, because they have to be a lot lighter than the ones in the front. Okay, I'm going to keep it this way, and now I can start drawing the plants and the flowers. And I'm gonna start with this orange one. I'm going to do this with this brush. This is called moving, and that's just because if you draw with this brush, it has a little bit of texture, and it's a little bit moving. So for that, I'm going to create a new layer, also on top of all the other layers. And I'm just starting with this one. And then I'm going to this one. And now I'm going to this green color, but I'm going to make it a little bit darker, so the contrast between the dark green and the raccoon will be enough. Yes. And I'm going to do this on a new layer just to be sure. It doesn't have to, but I always draw on a new layer. If I have to move something, it goes a lot faster. I'm making sure that they are not touching each other, because that will make the animation a lot more difficult. Then this one is coming from behind, so I have to make sure that I'm drawing till here and not on his body. I'm going to draw the stem of my flower, and I'm also doing this in this green color. I forgot to create a new layer. It's okay for this. And then I'm going to this color. And I'm gonna draw the flowers. You see that I'm drawing this really simple and without any details, but that's necessary if you want to create an animation. You can't add too much detail because the plants are going to grow in the animation, and if you have a lot of detail, it's just too hard to create. Okay, I'm going to make my sketch invisible so I can clearly see what I've done. There's one thing I'm going to do, and that's adding some nerves in these leaves. I know this is a little bit of detail, but yeah, I think it's necessary to make them pop out a little bit more. So I'm going to a lighter green. And just add a small stripe in each leaf. So I have to remember this color. I'm adding it to the color palette. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this canvas. So I'm going to the gallery. I'm duplicating my illustration, and I'm just going to rename it already. Animated raccoon. And then I'm going to create my animation. The first thing I have to do for this is merge all my layers of my raccoon. I can erase my sketch now. I'm going to merge my flowers and then merge the raccoon and the grass. Okay, now I've got two layers. This is going to be my background layer in my animation, and this is just my reference layer where I can see where I have to draw my plans for my animation. So I'm going to make sure my animation assist is on. And now I have to make sure that my bottom layer with the raccoon is a background. I have to toggle this on, and now it will stay fixed in the background. And this frame is the layer where you can see the flowers. You can use them as a reference. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of my background layer. The settings. I'm going to lower the frames per second to 10 frames per second. Onion skin frames is on maximum. Onion skin opacity is 60%. I'm just going to start with this and we'll see where we're heading. So I'm going to start with all my flowers. So now I have to make sure that in my first layer the plants are just tiny and they pop out of the grass, and frame by frame they grow larger and larger and they have more leaves. So in this first layer I'm gonna start with my green. I have to make sure that I'm working with my moving brush and make the stems come out of the ground a little bit. And now I'm going to this orange plant, going to the orange color and doing the same. Okay, now I'm going to make a duplicate of my layer and I'm going to make my plants longer in the next frame. So I've got this orange color and I'm just making it longer so that it grows. I'm going to my green and make my stems of my flowers longer. I'm going to duplicate the layer and make them grow. Oh, I forgot my orange. These ones. So now I can draw a little leaf in this big leaf to make the beginning of the leaf. So it's starting to grow. And now I'm going to make my stem longer and make my leaf grow. So you see, this is going to take a long time, but if you want a really nice animation, then you need to take your time. You can put on some music and try to meditate a little bit while you're doing this. Duplicate. So now my leaves on this plant are growing. So this plant has a little nerve in its leaves. So I have to make sure that I draw this also with a lighter green, because the nerves are growing with the plant. I know this takes a lot more time, but it will also be a lot more prettier to see in the end. Okay, create a copy. I think I forgot my orange. Yes, try to make sure that every layer you create has some growth in it. So I'm going to test what my animation looks like, and I'm going to press play. It's going quite fast. I'm going to lower the frames per second to 6. So now you can still see this layer. I'm going to make this one invisible, but it looks really good. Yes, that's perfect. Okay. I see I forgot to add the nerves in these leaves in this last layer, so I'm going to add them. I forgot them in the last 2 layers, so it's good that I checked. And in this one. Okay, create a duplicate. I'm making this layer visible again, and I'm moving on. First, I'm going to let these ones grow with the orange. Now I'm going to draw the beginning of this flower with this color. And at first it's going to be really small, so this is more than enough. Also, I have to make sure that these are not growing too fast, because they will be ready before these ones will be ready, so the steps can be quite a lot. And in this one, my little flower is growing. I'm going to the green. If you want to make sure that you added enough, you can toggle between the layers and make them visible so you can see how the steps are going on. I'm going to duplicate again and draw further on my animation. So I think it's about time that this one is also popping out behind his back. So I'm going to do this, to start this in this layer. Okay, this looks good. So I'm going to copy the top layer a few times so that in the end the flowers will stay calm. And I'm just going to duplicate about 10 or 15 times. That's also a personal thing. So I'm going to test it. Okay. So I'm going to add some little hearts when the flowers are still. So I'm going to copy the layer. By the way, if you are at your limit of your layers, you have to lower the size of your canvas, so that way you will have more layers to work with. But if you have enough layers, you don't have to do that, of course. So in this new layer, I'm going to draw some hearts. I'm going to start with one little heart. I'm going to duplicate, make this little heart a little bit bigger, and draw another one. Duplicate. And I'm also going to duplicate this top layer a few times so it stays still for a moment. And then I'm going to press play. Okay, it's taking too long for the heart to appear, so I'm going to delete a few of the in-between layers. So this one can be deleted, this one also. Oh, I'm deleting the wrong ones. I have to make sure that I'm deleting. Okay, I think this is okay. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate my top layers a few times so it stays really long at the end point. Now I'm still going to remove some of the layers in between. going to lower the onion skin frames to see which frames in the middle are duplicated. And it's this one, because I still find that the hearts are not appearing fast enough. Okay, that's better. Yeah, I'm happy with this. I can share this as an animated GIF, but when I do this, you see that the green underneath the raccoon is brown at the edges. That's because the background layer is separate. So I'm going to add a new layer. But first I have to make sure that my background is switched off. And now I'm adding a new layer underneath my raccoon, and I'm going to fill it with completely white. If I want to have complete full white, I can tap twice in the white area and it will snap to the white. And now I'm going to fill this empty layer and I'm going to merge it with my raccoon so it's in the same layer. And when I make this a background layer again, then normally this should be okay. This layer can also be deleted. You can keep it invisible anyway, but you can also delete it. That's the reference layer with my flowers and my plants. So if I'm going to share this as an animated GIF again, you see that the green is nicely fading out and not getting brown around the edges. So I can export this to my library or to my files. In my case, I'm just going to save the image and it's going to be saved in my image library. But now it's still a GIF, and if I want to show this in Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or anything, it may be that it doesn't support GIF or that it shows it just one time and then it stops. So if you want to create a video of it, you can use an app. I use the app GIFvid. It's not for free. I think it's €1 and a little bit. But if you know another way to transform a GIF to a longer MP4 video, please let me know in the comments. But for this, I'm going to use my GIFvid app. I'm going to create and I'm going to import my GIF from my photo library. Select resolution. I'm going for highest. It's generating the video, and now in the right slide I can make a video that is just 1 minute, and now it will loop a few times till it is just 1 minute, and now I can share it in Instagram or anything else. So and now I can save it in my image library or in my files. Yay, you made it! You completed this tutorial. I hope you liked it. You can subscribe to my channel to stay updated about next tutorials. Please share it in your stories or your posts on Instagram so I can admire your work. I'm really looking forward to it.